Hello. Hey, Anthony. So, hi everybody. So we're here at a group of researchers here at the Global Hub also, but I think the chair is Kanishka, right? So whenever you're ready, Kanishka, we're ready.
Okay,
Yeah,
welcome.
Hi, Anthony.
Thank you very much.
Should we begin? I guess we are 2 minutes past. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think
yes. All right, Anthony. So let's hear it. We want to learn about how Nigeria managed to get a subsidy for fossil fuels removed. Right. Let's start.
Can I begin the presentation?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm being from Nigeria now. It's 1 p.m. So thank you very much for this opportunity for this presentation. Just a minute. Good. So the title of this presentation is Navigating the Pathway to Carbon Tax Implementation in Nigeria, Lessons from Fuel Subsidy Removal. It's a research result from our collaborative work with the EfD, between EfD Nigeria and EfD Ghana. Yeah, as an outline, we have an introduction, current status of the Nigerian carbon market, understanding fuel subsidy removal in Nigeria, and lessons from fuel subsidy removal, the way forward, and going forward. It's obvious that effective carbon pricing around the world has been identified as a potential instrument in the global effort for greenhouse gas reduction around the world. However, one of the problems is gaining public support for it around the world. So as part of the global drive towards decarbonization and sustainable development, it is known that carbon pricing and reform has become a very good instrument to redirect energy use and consumption towards cleaner energy. This has always involved some policy reforms and has to do with taxes and subsidies. And such reforms has always come at a cost, both to the society, to the economy. The society around the world has had different experiences. And the part to it is that people, even in Africa, have always had their own. In the West, this has been smooth, but in Africa, this has not been, we have not had a very good experience. So though there has been evidences of several policies, strategies around the world, but this has not really yielded the needed results, especially in building public support in Africa. Particularly in Nigeria, over the years, we've tried various forms, various strategies in the past to be able to address subsidy removal, but it has always triggered very, very heavy resistance from the society and from the CSOs. Therefore, one of the concerns and one of the things that we have always advocated, even around the world, and different scholars have always insisted, that how is it that we are able to achieve feasibility, political feasibility for carbon pricing in the world today? And one of the things that we have always seen is that because of the fact that there has been a lot of pressures from different angles and different corners, we want to be able to understand how is it possible for there to be a political feasibility for a carbon pricing and carbon strategy around the world. And that is the essence of this research. This study was conducted by, just like we talked about it before, a team from the University of Nigeria and a team from the EfD Ghana. And the members of the team are as listed below. We examined incentive-based policy options for carbon pricing in West Africa. And we looked at it from the launch part of fuel subsidy removal. It's a peer learning program that is sponsored by EfD Network around the world, and we are focusing on Nigeria and Ghana. We looked at different kinds of incentives for carbon pricing in Nigeria and Ghana, but this one is going to be focused in Nigeria. The stakeholders are as follows. We have different stakeholders from the different ministries of agriculture, ministries of environment, the different organizations that has to do with the fuel subsidy removal and fuel subsidy implementation. We have the CSOs, we have some private organizations that we interviewed around Nigeria and also in Ghana, but this one is going to be focusing only in Nigeria. We are going to be looking at the current status of fuel subsidy removal. What is our understanding of Nigerian carbon market? That is the first thing we're going to be talking about. Currently, there is no clear-cut policy for carbon tax implementation in Nigeria. Every organization we have interviewed have looked at it from the perspective that this is something that is ongoing and has not yet come to stay in Nigeria. Currently, there is no clear-cut policy for carbon tax implementation in the country. So the different organizations that are in charge of carbon pricing in Nigeria have indicated that, especially the Nigerian Council on Climate Change, has done different kinds of programs, especially workshops in the past, to be able to organize people and stakeholders to show and explain to them what carbon pricing is all about, what carbon tax is all about. But in Nigeria today, there was a launch of the carbon market activation policy, which is focused only on carbon credit and not on carbon tax. It introduces new market infrastructure, includes the national carbon registry, and all the eligibility rules that are aligned with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. It also introduces incentives to scale private sector credit in Nigeria. What is the support for carbon tax in Nigeria? So far, there is need for implementation of carbon taxes. Every organization we interviewed are of the opinion and agree with the fact that there needs to be carbon tax in Nigeria. All of them are in the affirmative and are positive that this is a framework, is a policy that we need to implement in the country. So the support for carbon pricing and carbon tax is also something that we have that they will also synergize and say that there is clear need for awareness. if carbon tax is to be implemented in the country, there needs to be clear-cut awareness from all the agencies that are supposed to implement the carbon tax. So that is one of the takeaways from the different organizations. The second one is that there is a concern that the carbon tax should be implemented in such a way that only heavy emitters are to be taxed, not everybody. Okay, so there is also a concern that for us to be able to implement carbon tax effectively, that we need to be able to understand what is actually happening with the fuel subsidy removal in the country. Because if we don't understand what has happened with the fuel subsidy removal, it will be a problem for us to be able to implement the carbon tax in the country. So let us understand what has happened with the fuel subsidy removal. All the agencies of government agree that the agency that is responsible for the implementation of carbon for fuel subsidy is the presidency, the NMPC, and the Ministry of Finance. These are the agencies people understand and agree are implementing the fuel subsidy. Now, the question is, if fuel subsidy succeeded now, what happened in the past? Why has it not succeeded all this while? The question is that we have tried to investigate why is it that over the years, fuel subsidy has not yet succeeded. And people are of the opinion that why it has not yet succeeded is because people don't trust government. All others are saying that one of the issues is that they do not believe that the outcome of the fuel subsidy will be properly utilized. Others are saying that the benefit from the fuel subsidy may not trickle down to the people, as well as there will not be adequate cushioning effect for the removal as we transit from the removal to the from the point of no fuel subsidy, from the point of subsidy to the point of no subsidy, that there is going to be a shock for the people, and they don't want that to happen. That is why this has not yet succeeded over the years. So the general perception of the people is that fuel subsidy removal was appropriate. There is no doubt about that. However, that one of the issues that they want to emphasize is that there was need for a cushioning program before the implementation of the fuel subsidy. So there is nobody that was of the opinion that the fuel subsidy should not be there, or that it should be reinstated. That did not occur. Everyone will. So the takeaway is that there is a knowledge gap in the fuel subsidy removal. There's a haphazardness of the implementation. There's a lack of social protection, and there is low public support for it. And then poor timing. So what was the reason for the minimal resistance in the current fuel subsidy removal? There is a general disenchantment. Fuel subsidy has been talked about over the years, but people are of the opinion that, yes, we are fed up with this. They also want to give government a benefit of doubt to see how are they going to be able to implement it. The other one is that the way that the subsidy was removed, the suddenness did not give people the opportunity to react. There is also widespread belief that there is corruption in the fuel subsidy regime. So it needs to go. So everybody is in tandem of the fact that fuel subsidy should go. What is the perception about the utilization of the fuel subsidy savings? The majority of the people have this notion that the savings of fuel subsidy may not be adequately utilized for the benefit of the people. That is the takeaway, that people believe that the fuel subsidy regime, the resources from it, the savings from it may not be adequately utilized for the benefit of the people. What are the positive feedbacks from fuel subsidy removal? There are a lot of positive feedbacks, including the reduction in fossil fuels. There is reduction in fuels in filling stations. There's the elimination of fuels, reduction in the supply of petroleum, regular supply of petroleum product, because since the fuel subsidy was removed, every station you go now, there is regular supply of fuel. People can queue in and buy fuel without long queues. There is reduction in emissions. There is reduction in the use of fuel because of the high price of fuel. People are now reducing their use of fuel. This is a good thing for the country, and it's good thing for the society. It's good thing for the environment. So, having learned about what has happened with the fuel subsidy removal, one question we will want to ask ourselves: now that we are talking about the implementation of carbon tax, what lessons should we learn from the removal of fuel subsidy? What lessons are we supposed to learn from it? One is that immediately after the removal of fuel subsidy, there was introduction of palliative. Palliative was the only thing that people visibly saw that was used to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy. But one of the problems is that people still say that the manner of the implementation of the palliative was questionable, because the formula that was used for the distribution of the palliative or allocating it was not something that was very transparent. So people really questioned it. And also, people believe that most of the palliatives were only beneficial to those that are close to the politicians. So,
Anthony, can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
What do you mean by palliatives?
Palliatives are like handouts. Like, for example, they bring some food stuff, different kinds of food stuff that they distribute in different parts of the country, Indomie, rice, and all that. That's different kinds of food stuff that are brought to the people at different places. They give it to the government, different governments in the different states to distribute it to the people. That is what they call palliatives.
Okay. Right.
Can I proceed?
Yeah.
Thank you. So what were the challenges from subsidy removal? The major challenge from subsidy removal was increased hardship in the country and inflation. There is, if you come to Nigeria today, the price of goods and services has skyrocketed, more than some 500%, up to 1,000% increase in the prices of goods and different services in the country. That is one of the challenges that has come with fuel subsidy removal. Remember what we're talking when we're talking about these issues of fuel subsidy removal is for us to understand how best should we implement the carbon tax. So these are the feedbacks from fuel subsidy removal. One was the introduction of palliative, which was just haphazardly distributed. Now is inflation, now is hardship across the country. Now, what is the perception of the current spending of the savings from fuel subsidy? Majority of the people are of the opinion that the spending of the savings from fuel subsidy removal is very poor. That is the perception of people, that they've not seen any visible or clear evidence that there is proper spending of the resources. Some say it is fair. Only very few say that it is where the spendings are very good. So in general, there is unprecedented rise in prices of goods and services. There is no clarity about the use of the savings. After 2 years of the introduction of the fuel subsidy, there is a sense of frustration among the citizens, and there is a feeling of uncertainty amongst everybody in the country that we are not happy with the way the subsidy was removed, though we agree with it that it should go, but that we are not happy with how the way it is being implemented. So if we contrast this with Ghana, because we also carried the study in Ghana, the same template we used in Nigeria was what we used in Ghana, and we found out that Ghana started its own deregulation as far back as 2005. there was an implementation range of some compensatory social protections and policies prior to the subsidy removal. There was a provision of safety net to mitigate price shocks and prepare the public for the removal. So unlike in Nigeria, when the president just announced on the day he was being inaugurated that fuel subsidy has gone, in Ghana, there was a steady preparation. People were aware, things were put in place to cushion the effect, assuming fuel subsidy is removed. These are what we need to do. And some of those things that Ghana did was the public transport expansion. There was the national health insurance in Ghana. Capitation grants and school feeding was implemented. Livelihoods empowerment against poverty was implemented. And cost of living allowances was implemented in Ghana. So these were the things that were put in place prior to the removal of fuel subsidy in Ghana, but this was not the case in Nigeria. So what are we saying? What are we talking about now? Look, vis-a-vis carbon tax implementation, should we also do an abrupt implementation of carbon tax without preparedness? We need to be very, very much prepared in Nigeria, learning from what has happened with fuel subsidy and the shocks and the aftermath of it, and what we can learn from Ghana. We need to be prepared. So what are the suggestions from people about what should happen with respect to the fuel subsidy, the savings from the fuel subsidy removal? People are of the opinion that schools and security should be prioritized. Number one, there should be health and road infrastructure, investment in agriculture, in blue economy, in technology and IT, combating corruption, investment in railway and mass transit, increase in minimum wage, and offering people a living wage. These are the feedbacks from the people that if we see these things happen in Nigeria as a result of the fuel subsidy removal, that we will now be ready to support the implementation of carbon tax. That the government should invest the resources that are saved from fuel subsidy into these critical areas of the country, and then we can now proceed with carbon tax. So there is an appeal for caution. So there is this feeling that next time the government is about to implement this kind of policy, that the government should do targeted timeline implementation. Timeline. This is going to happen this time. This is going to happen this time. Okay, there should also be measures to cushion the effects of such kind of implementation in the country. Not necessarily palliatives, as was the case in fuel subsidy removal, but engage in proper projects. This is one of the feedbacks from the people we interviewed. The next one is that there should be transparency, sectoral development, enhancement of per capita income of the people, improve security, good governance, rationalize the removal of, they say they are of the opinion that except we're able to rationalize effectively and prove beyond reasonable doubt that we have been able to deliver on our mandate by utilizing the proceeds from fuel subsidy, that the implementation of carbon tax may not gain the needed support. So furthermore, there is also a caution that the government should invest in the revenue from the subsidy appropriately and properly account for all the revenues that has been generated from fuel subsidy. There is need to implement mitigation measures, okay, especially in the transport sector, okay. There's need to invest in infrastructural development to bring about a seamless implementation or mitigation process in the transport system. So The next one is, this has been talked about before, issue of removal of corruption, that this should be addressed, sovereignty of our resources, put the public resources to public use, less dependent on international funding. Because if we are able to implement these strategies, that it is only then that you can convince the Nigerian people that, yes, we are ready to implement carbon tax. Except these measures are implemented, that because right from the beginning, they said they want to give the government a benefit of doubt for the implementation of carbon fuel subsidy removal. They want to see what government is going to do with the resources. Now that the government has removed the fuel subsidy, people are suffering, that they want to know how government is able to implement and use the resources from the fuel subsidy removal before you can talk about the implementation of carbon tax. Conclusion. Yes, carbon tax policy is promising. And from our investigation, we have seen from the people that everybody is, yes, in support of the implementation of a carbon tax. Yes, but it is just in a rudimentary stage. It's still in a rudimentary stage. However, there is a need for government to build trust and confidence in the people and citizenry. Because if they are not effectively utilizing the resources to build confidence, then they may not be able to fully support the implementation of carbon tax. They need to invest in critical infrastructure we talked about before, invest in social amenities, health, education, and energy. There's a need to revamp agriculture, invest in security, provide social security, and provide the people with a living wage. This is the feedback, the summary of the feedback from the implementation of subsidy. And if these things are addressed, then Nigerians are at home and ready to implement and embrace the implementation of carbon tax. Furthermore, there is also need for awareness creation. There's a need for advocacy before the implementation of carbon tax. If you go around the country, many people don't even know what carbon tax is about. Even the agencies, that most of the people that are in the agencies that are responsible, that should be able to know what carbon tax is, most of them don't know what it is. So we should be able to create awareness, go into for advocacy, and implement these strategies. First of all, advocacy, second, awareness, and then third, implement strategies to convince the people that yes, we've been able to deliver on our mandate by utilizing the resources from subsidy removal to benefit the people. Then we can now proceed with the implementation of carbon tax in the country. Otherwise, there may not be that synergy among stakeholders or support from the general public for the implementation of a carbon tax. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. So I have a couple of, I suppose you could call them questions. And then there's one question by Alejandro, and then we can open up to others. So the first one that and this is just because I'm quite ignorant. Did Ghana have a similar subsidy of the same sort as in Nigeria?
Can you come again? Sorry.
Did Ghana have a similar subsidy as Nigeria?
Sure. Similar. Yes.
So they have also been successful at. Is it removed? Is it just reduced? What is the?
It is removed now, but there is a range in Ghana. It's phased. You see, they tend to respond to what is happening in the system by, if the situation becomes overwhelming for the people, they can introduce some cushioning in the price regime. so that the people will not feel the shock.
Right.
But it's not something that is just totally removed. They look at what happens in the system and know whether they are going to bring in a bit of a relief or let it be as it is. That's what is happening in Ghana.
Okay, so it's a bit more structured, right?
Yes.
Right. I guess I have one more question, and then there are others that I'll take up. I found it very interesting that you talk to a bunch of these stakeholders. So sort of two associated questions there. How did you identify these? I mean, it seems quite obvious how you would have done it, but I'd still like to know. How did you identify who to talk to? And just in terms of logistics, was this done online? Did you actually go talk to people in person, or was it some mix?
Prior to our going out to start with, the interviews were done physically. We interviewed all the stakeholders physically, except few who, for some reasons, were not. I think just one or two. But every other stakeholder we interviewed them physically. We decided to look at all the different agencies of government that has something to do with fuel subsidy, environment, the CSOs, the trade unions, because the trade unions are those that are always agitating against it. We looked at the different trade unions, we interviewed them, and we looked at the different agencies of government that has something to do with carbon tax. For example, the different NNPC, the Nigerian Midstream Downstream Petroleum Development Authority, the Energy Commission of Nigeria, Ministry of Environment, National Council on Climate Change. So we assembled all the different agencies that has to do with the implementation of carbon tax and has something to do with environment and energy. And also the private sector, like some oil companies. We interviewed about 2 or 3 oil moguls in the country to get their perspective. We also interviewed the different associations that have to do with agitation for or against fuel subsidy. We interviewed them physically.
Okay, so I'm seeing a bunch of hands. Why don't we go around? So I'll start from left to right on my screen. So Rex Asiyama, you can ask a question.
Yes, thank you so much, and greetings to all of you senior colleagues. And thanks, Anthony, for presenting this succinctly. I just wanted to add in for the Ghana part, which I was involved in, just to say that, I mean, Anthony was spot on. In the case of Ghana, there is nothing currently like fuel subsidies. The situation is such that there's a more of some kind of an automatic adjustment that comes in depending on when it needs to be introduced, looking at the macroeconomic situation at hand and whether the government of the day feels that some of these subsidies need to be introduced to relieve the burden on its populace. The last time it was reintroduced, it was based on a similar thing. The cost of living had gone too high, and the government decided to zero rate certain aspects of the levies that go into the price buildup of fuel. So that is it. I also noticed a question by one colleague in the chat about how the social interventions in the case of Ghana linked to fuel subsidy. So the argument is over time, Ghana's macroeconomic position changed, partly due to exposure to debt and the debt burden and how to manage that in line with meeting demands for fuel energy. In order to do that, the government realized that it couldn't shoulder all the burden by itself. So over time, it introduced some of these fiscal policy tools that we've spoken about, subsidies and taxes. Now, what we discovered in the case of Ghana, talking to experts at the Ministry of Energy, they made us understand that when you take out the subsidy, as is the case in Nigeria, the cost of the product itself goes up, and that adds to the cost of living. However, social interventions were introduced to sort of cushion the populace from the rising cost and the cost bedding that resulted from taking out the subsidies, in a way that literally meant that by removing the subsidies and gaining tax revenue from additional taxes, they could redirect the revenues towards some of these social interventions at the time, especially in, I think, around 2008 or so, where they had the National Health Insurance and the Metro Mass and all of these other ones that picked up. The status of some of these interventions now is not the best. But at the time, they were introduced to sort of assist with the cost of living situation. We do not realize any such arrangement in the case of Nigeria now. It's not to say that it may never happen, but comparatively, it's not the same in the case of Nigeria. And they have their own plans to sort of deal with how the cost of living issues have come about because of the removal of the subsidies. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up and also answering one of the questions. So Thomas, you can.
Thank you very much. Thanks, NwaJesus, for a nice presentation. I was just wondering, have you got good data on all the subsidies in detail, like how much it has been per year, maybe per region, maybe per it might be useful to look at these data carefully, at what the real cost has been in the past, and that will, because the question will be asked, who gets the money instead, but it's not such a simple question as it might appear. So you need to gather good data of what really happened in the past in order to try to start to ask the question, how will those monies be used in the future?
Yeah, that's good. We've not really looked at that, but I know that the allocation to fuel subsidy over the years is something that is handy and we can look at. However, just like I said earlier on, one of the issues that arose from this is that the people earlier on, even before the removal of the subsidy, we are very skeptical of the fact that that the resources may not be adequately utilized. And if after 2 years they are still feeling like that, that means something really need to be done. Yes, it will be difficult to say, yes, that this money was used here or used there because the government keeps spending money on different elements. But the perspective is that there should be a general feel from the people that, yes, we are better off now that fuel subsidy is removed, that, yes, at least so and so thing has been done, so and so things has been done, that can, it's okay. And maybe that attributability may not be there, but at least they should be able to see something that is glaringly clear, that, yes, that I think we are better off based on infrastructure, based on health, based on education, based on this and that and that. There should be something different from what it used to be to now that the government has enough money to implement some of these things. That's what they are saying.
Exactly. I think, I mean, if you ask me, how is the Swedish revenue from the carbon tax spent? I could not answer that question because it's just put in the budget, right?
Yes,
but
yes.
If you want to try to create a first order answer, if you see the cost of the subsidy and then it goes down, and you see some other cost to, I don't know, health services, for instance, and the cost goes up, then you
Yes.
can kind of make the argument that, oh, they took some of the money they used to spend on subsidies and they started using it for health services.
But one of the issues is that if the amount goes up, does it really translate to the actual use of that money? Because
Yeah.
money may be budgeted for something and goes into somebody's pocket. That's the question. That's why they're also talking about corruption and talking about
Well,
effective implementation and use of money.
yes, so maybe there's quite a lot of work to be done to collect these data, but it's important. It's a data collection effort that is needed.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. Right. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and over to Alejandro and everyone else in the room. I don't know who has a question.
Yeah, so that's Franklin. One thing we should consider is moving from subsidy to taxation is more of a big jump, right? So the removal of the subsidy by itself is even a tax on its own, right? Given that now you're going to pay the actual cost of the good in question. So what countries do in the case of Ghana is the reason why they introduced the livelihood support program to target the vulnerable and those in the very low income group. So assuming that the money finds its way back to the government coffers, okay, I'm thinking that targeting of these kind of programs is what is much important. So for developing countries to be encouraged to introduce the taxes, there should be a case whereby the removal of the subsidies should be the main area of concern, okay, because indirectly it serves similar purpose like the taxes, just that it's more of a big jump. So I think the conversation should be more on the removal of the subsidies. That is, countries who already have subsidies. Then when that is resolved, then we would now talk about the taxes, because the burden becomes so high on the belly. Though when it comes to fuel consumption, those in the low and high income groups spend more on that and they gain when there is subsidy. And so that's a comment I want to bring on board.
Thank you very much.
I have one too, a bit in the line with Thomas' comment, but related to the Ghanaian experience. As I understand it, there you have had a long time you have used fuel subsidies, and several times the government tried to reduce the subsidy, and then there was a protest, and then they had to reintroduce it.
Sure.
And that happened several times. And then somehow you managed then to introduce some compensatory policies and maybe changed how you do the subsidy, as you said, Rex, with the macroeconomic policy and somehow. But kind of describing that story in detail, how big was the subsidy and how was it changed, and just that kind of historical path to some kind of learning that has taken place, I suppose, and linking that, comparing with the Nigerian experience somehow in a little bit more detail. I know you're working on this paper, so that's why I'm flagging that. I'm even imagining you could have like this diagram of this subsidy and the level over time, and then describe it very visually. That would be very kind of nice to follow. Just
especially from the Ghana perspective.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. In our report, we have technically we have a section where we have described the fuel subsidy scenario in Ghana and Nigeria over time, and in fact in detail. So I think what you are saying now is that we should make it a bit more tight. So we have noted that.
Okay, there's one more question in the chat about, this is regulation of a carbon credit market. I guess this is a bit in the future. But anyway, the question is who's expected to buy carbon credits out here?
Well, it's something that is an axiom already known that the carbon credit will be bought by international organizations and especially the heavy emitters who want to offset their carbon emission from maybe developing economies. So there are a lot of organizations in the world today that have keyed into that, and that is why Nigeria has launched that policy on the carbon market. The carbon market policy, and according to the government, they want to tap into about $2.5 billion between now and 2030 from such organizations. There are a lot of organizations around the world that are ready to key into that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really like, this isn't really something that I'm, so maybe this is a kind of stupid question, but I mean, does it, from sort of a basic perspective, is this really going to help? Because if the total amount of emissions stays the same, you're just buying credits from another place. Particularly for carbon, it's a global pollutant. So I have a somewhat skeptical take on this. I'm not sure it's really solving anything. Apart from, of course, getting some money into poorer countries, which is not trivial, but from the sort of environment standpoint, is there going to be something that is really beneficial? Because let's say you introduce a carbon market and you say, okay, and let's say everything works smoothly. Here's what a credit will buy you so many tons. And then you have someone coming in who's emitting in some other countries. Is the idea that they can come in and they can basically cover their emissions and say, look, we bought so much from these guys in that other part of the world. But realistically, nothing really has happened. I mean, we're still with the same number of emissions, right?
Anyway, I think what is this is a rhetoric question that everybody keeps asking, especially environmentalists. That what are we going to make any difference in the environmental angle? Yes, in the economic angle, the countries that are going to say the credit will benefit economically. And but the one thing about it is that for those that are buying, there is a little bit of incentive to reduce their emission, because the more money you spend on buying will tell on your net revenue. So I think that may be the only benefit that it may be. It gives you the incentive to cut down your emissions so that you don't spend much money to buy. That's my own understanding. But generally, if nothing changes, then I think we're only making economic transactions.
Yeah, exactly. And but to get, I mean, to be a little, I think one thing that I'm not sure how this will all play out is, let's say you do want to start a market. I think this is a lot more complicated. I'm thinking about a million things right now. But for instance, if you think about, okay, what would be the what would be the exchange rate between one country and another, and would the one carbon credit bought from the EU equal one carbon credit bought from India? Would that be? I'm not sure that would actually be what will eventually come out. So I guess I don't know. Anyway, this is going too far, but
there are a lot of questions.
maybe
There are a lot of questions to ask.
Yeah,
a lot of questions
maybe,
to ask.
Let's take two more basic questions about how do you get a subsidy out. So let me try to kind of just summarize all that I've heard in the last 50 minutes. I think In some ways, it's not a very, I would say, earth-shattering conclusion, but it's still something that's useful to understand. Is that it seems to me, just given this comparison between Ghana and Nigeria, that to successfully get good policies in, you need some kind of stability, you need some kind of somewhat measured slow progress that is known upfront, and the sort of dramatic overnight policy changes that are sometimes favored by some sorts of politicians is really not maybe doesn't seem in the long term to actually do much. And I think that's a useful thing to stress over and over again.
Sure.
But that seems to me to be
that's the take home. That is the take home, that for the implementation of any policy, not just about carbon tax, and for any policy to be effectively implemented, there needs to be careful planning, step-by-step planning, and things put in place to be able to be sure that such policy is something that is successful. But if at the end of the day, you just wake up one day and, well, they say that those who do not plan always plan to fail. So there needs to be careful planning for every step one wants to take, especially government and politicians, to be able to be effective. Although, just like we talked about the issue of Ghana, they implemented different kinds of cushioning effects. Yes, most of them and some of them were not well sustainable, but at least in the short run, when the subsidy was removed, the people really felt that, didn't feel that shock so much, unlike the case of Nigeria, when it was abrupt. So at least within that period of removal or implementation, before the people now gradually transit to the normalcy, there should be that cushioning effect for it, for people to now transit to what is supposed to be. That's the general take home from this project.
It would also, I think, be, I think I kind of agree with the point on maybe some more detail on what happened with Ghana, because this, the on-off of the removal would also be useful to understand, because this is something that I think every country has trouble with. Anyway, the developed or developing, I think this is not just a developing country problem. But anyway, I think that's about all the questions that are there. I guess I can wait for about a couple more minutes. But I think what's useful here, at least for me, is this consultation with stakeholders. I am personally very excited about text analysis, and I feel like maybe this is one way to also get good hard quantitative data outside of surveys. Maybe we can think about how to actually do this better, because this is really, I feel this is something that's actually quite important when it comes to these any kind of successful policy change. It seems like you do need to get everyone on board. So it doesn't look like there are any further questions, and maybe we can end. But I have one sort of final comment. So if I got it right, it seems like people had more of a sense of sort of the environmental benefits coming in. Is that true of Nigeria?
There's a general feeling that, yes, there is more of environmental benefit than economic. Yes, because generally in Nigeria today, there is a very high and drastic reduction in the use of fuel. There are very few cars. Most people have parked their cars. In fact, people don't even buy cars these days because of the cost of fueling the vehicles. So many people who use cars have gone back to bicycles. Those who use bicycles are now using, no, those who use cars have gone to motorcycles. The people park their cars and now use motorcycles that will consume less fuel. But one of the problems is that because there is no organized mass transit, people, in fact, you see many people walk when they cannot afford to board taxis. In fact, apart from the environmental benefits, the health benefits must have increased because a lot of people now walk distances because they cannot afford to pay for the cost of transportation and all that. So there is general reduction in the consumption of petroleum products. In fact, when we interviewed the marketers, most of them are really being affected. Some of them are shutting down. They are sacking their staff, rationalizing their distributions, as much as 50% cut in their revenues, as contrary to what it used to be. So you can attribute that to the fact that they are not really finding it easy to cope. Most of their branches are shutting down, and they are rationalizing their operations and all that. So many staff that work in filling stations have been sacked because the filling stations are not able to pay them. So that is to show that they are not able to meet up with their revenue, not to talk of having enough to pay their staff. So at least more than 50% of gasoline use in Nigeria has been cut off, and that has a lot to do with the environment and people's attitudes to. In fact, generators. Many people don't burn generators again in their houses, unlike before, where every evening people just buy fuel and point it at the generators and be disturbing their neighbors. But these days, before you burn your generator, you will be sure that something you want to do is very important. So, and that is well, I don't know if it's a positive feedback.
Well, it reminds me of the stuff with COVID, when everyone was saying that, the air is getting cleaner, even though we have a pandemic on our hands.
Good.
Similar sort of, well, that's at least interesting that you can see the benefits, but yeah, it seems like if you don't back it up, those benefits will not be very long-lived. Okay, I think we can end now. I think we are right on time. So thanks for having me, guys. This was kind of useful. I learned something about this very interesting policy experiment. Thanks, Anthony. That was a nice presentation.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Kanishka. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.